I grew up in South Africa. There's two things that I'm really, really passionate about. And I've turned, like most entrepreneurs, I've turned that passion and curiosity into a business. The first one is people wasting scarce resources. It keeps me up at night. Any form of scarce resources. A resource that's needed to achieve goals of systems, right? So the kind of the weakest link or the bottleneck, that's one thing. And then the second thing is decision making. People making and often repeating bad decisions, especially when those decisions could cause avoidable and consequential mistakes. So these two things are related in that bad decisions causes wasting of resources. Does it make sense? So what I'd like to share with you just briefly today and give you a template to do a quick exercise, and obviously we won't have enough time to complete it, but you can continue with it, is to share with you just briefly what we do in our research lab. Is we develop apps to help people make better, faster decisions when it really, really matters. Those big consequential decisions, right? That's what basically we do. And what we've seen is that there are 4 types of decision mistakes that we make in the hardest type of decisions we make, which are the ones that involve intuition and judgment, right? As the first one is people tell you that you should use your intuition, which is generally a good idea or judgment, unless one of 4 conditions exists. Firstly, you haven't yet developed it. You haven't yet developed intuition in that field. So what we've done there is we've created an app that can extract the intuition out of the top experts like Thomas and get that intuition out and make it available to non-experts. Essentially providing scalability. So rather than using AI to study big data, we use AI to study the top human experts directly. And that offers massive scalability. So now we could have access to the top resource anywhere in the world for a fraction of the cost. The next one is we shouldn't be using our intuition if we don't realize to what extent our intuition is impacted by local or short-term impacts. So we think that the short-term or the local impact is a good reflection of what the total impact is. There we overcome it by providing people with simulation models so that they can see how a small change in one area can have a massive impact on a whole system. The third one is we shouldn't be using our intuition if we get overwhelmed easily by all the changes we have to make. And there we've created an app aptly called the Change Maker app. It's basically how to design and structure and plan and execute a whole bunch of changes. And then the last one, which I'll focus on today, is a Decision Maker app. It's looking at a specific decision and seeing if I can use that specific decision or problem as a fast track to find out what could have caused my past decision mistakes. So just briefly in terms of an introduction, I have a research lab. I also have a foundation, and the foundation is funded by big projects that we do with big organizations. So with Microsoft, they asked us to help redesign their end-to-end supply chain. So we looked at what was the decisions that were causing avoidable shortages and surpluses of devices they sell, like the Surface Pro, a keyboard, etc. Within the same financial year that we started, we built a simulation model of their whole supply chain. We tested the various best practices of the best supply chain management decisions, and we implemented an SAP. And in the same year, delivered the following results. They got their inventories down by over $500 million and sales up by a few $100 million, just by preventing avoidable shortages and surpluses. Tata Steel was a good example. We're working with Tata Steel in the UK. They started off losing £1 million a day. That industry was not viable. They will have to close down massive amount of the steel plants. Our target was how to get to £1 million profit a day. And over a 2-year period, we are already hitting we went from minus 300 down to plus 100, and the target is to get to 300. And it's all about a simple change, which is there's somebody that made a decision mistake that caused avoidable losses in profitability, employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction. So it's finding out what those decisions are and what sits underneath it. And in Utah State government, we work with them to help them improve the productivity of every single agency by 25%. So that's just a big background. The challenge is to understand why do good people make and often repeat bad decisions, right? My first assumption is that all people are good but we often have bad assumptions or beliefs, and that causes our bad decision making. So why do we sometimes overreact and make changes that we probably know are bad for us, or choices that we probably know are bad for us? Why do we sometimes procrastinate on making good changes or choices? And the Achilles heel, why do we often repeat the mistakes? Right? We have a mechanism to learn from experience, but it requires fast feedback. I touch a hot stove plate, I learn immediately. But what if you got burnt just a day later or a week later? And it's this lag of feedback that makes it very hard for us to learn in real world environments. So there's a constant focus for our research labs to find out how can we reduce the time to detect and correct for mistakes. That's reducing that feedback. So the link here to scarce resources, we asked ourselves, we work with some of the biggest organizations in the world, and you ask yourself, what's the constraint for the whole company? What's limiting that company from growing? It could be a number of things. It could be cash, it could be skills, it could be capacity, it could be market demand. But there was only one resource that we found out that met the criteria permanently. A resource that will always be overloaded. And it's called management attention, or if you're a single person, my attention. The number of things that demand your attention at work and at home will always exceed your available attention. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Attention is scarcer than time, because attention is essentially undistracted time to make progress on my most important goals. So then the question is, well, how do I close the shortage, right? Of course, I can outsource some stuff, decide what to stop doing, and that's a really important part. And the lesson here that we share with our clients is be careful. Prioritization just changes the sequence in the queue of stuff. It doesn't shorten the queue. And as long as the queue is long, you get overwhelmed, you're constantly in chaos. So I created a new measurement, which I call ROMA, that says if cash is a constraint, we use return on investment to make a decision about which option to go for, which change to go for. But what if attention is our constraint? We should use ROMA, return on management attention. I have two things, both can give me $1 million. The one will require 10 days of my attention, the other 100 days. Which one should I go for? Right? Simple. But then what we did was we said, okay, so let's say this represents the good decisions we make, and I don't know how big that gap is, maybe it's this small or quite big, but the rest is bad decisions. And we have to classify them into unavoidable versus avoidable decision mistakes. The fact is that many of these decisions we make, including which partner we select or which business we go into, are simply unavoidable, right? We have to check and see if it works. But there's a big chunk of it that's avoidable. So what we did was we started looking at what's the causes of those. Ignorance, inertia, and ineptitude. Basically what they represent is unavoidable means we'll never know. Ignorance means we didn't know, but somebody else did. And it could be because the education is lacking, or the change we have to make is quite counterintuitive. But the one I want to focus on today are the two in the middle, which is inertia, which we knew but we didn't act. Right? People overspend not because they don't know that it's good for them if they spend less or save more. People overeat not because they don't know that it's bad for them. People smoke not because they don't know that it's bad for them, but they still get stuck. Why? And that's the ones that we were very curious about. How do we go about creating a system, a very simple step-by-step process that can uncover the strong emotions that's behind inertia and ineptitude, right? Inertia is, I knew, but I didn't act. I did something I shouldn't, or I didn't do something I should. And then the second part is ineptitude. I did act, but I compromised. I didn't apply the knowledge fully. The key for us was understanding how do we get there? How can we help somebody, rather than spending 5 years as a psychologist, go very quickly from a dark cloud that they find that they're currently experiencing, some problem that's, or opportunity that's hanging over their head, immediately down to the limiting assumption or belief that could be causing the inertia or ineptitude. And this is the idea that there's a silver lining in every dark cloud. If you want to pass these around and you can follow through, there's 2 pages. There's an overall process that we developed. It's called the Pro-Con Cloud method, and you'll see why it's called that. And then we have a decision maker app that just guides people through this decision process. We've tested it with kids all the way from 7 all the way up to 70s, CEO level, down to shop floor level, people that can read and write, people that can't, because as long as you can draw pictures, you can kind of use it. So what it is based on is we looked at what's the decision mistakes we make and what's the step that's needed to prevent that mistake. So the first one is we get distracted with unimportant problems, or we procrastinate on important ones. So the minimum that we need to do is to ask this guy, what is this dark cloud that's hanging over you? What's this problem that you're experiencing? I'm currently overweight, or my business isn't growing. And explain why is it bad or important for them personally, or for their department, if they don't resolve it. And then why is it also important for the rest of the system or the other stakeholders that they care about, important to resolve. And once you've completed those steps, the app will stop you and say, these are the reasons you've given yourself why this is important. Is it important enough to resolve this right now, or is it a distraction? If it's a distraction, find another dark cloud. This one isn't dark enough. The next step that we go for is the next problem that we have is we often, from a problem, we jump to a solution, not realizing that the status quo is always a force, right? And there's a reason why the status quo is there and why we have a status quo bias. The other mistake is we jump to blaming somebody, either ourselves or somebody else. So what this step does is says, fine, I now have a problem that's important enough. Show me the conflict that I have in terms of dealing with it. There's some change I have to make, like go on a diet or invest in growth versus don't. And the reason why we get stuck or why we might overreact is there's not just two sides, which is a traditional pro-con list. There's actually 4 sides to considering a decision. It's a pro and con of the change and a pro and con of not changing, right? If you think about stop smoking, there's a unique positive of stopping, but there's also unique negative, which is all the effort and maybe the fear of gaining weight. But then there's also a unique positive of not stopping, of continuing, which is I have a way of coping with stress. But there's also unique negative. And by helping people understanding all these things, they write them in. What's the reasons they give themselves of why this option versus this option is viable options? And what we've seen is that often people confuse lack of courage with the lack of the inability to deal with this ambivalence. Ambivalence is when I see both the plus and minus of something or someone and I get stuck. I don't know how to deal with it. And what we've been testing in our research lab is you give somebody the ability to resolve this ambivalence, to show them that there's a way that you can get all the pluses without any of the minuses. Suddenly they get courage to act. Now the third step shows you how to do that. But before we go on to the first step, this is just understanding the real problem. We thought that was the problem. The real problem is I'm stuck in a conflict. The other side is, who do I blame? Do I blame anybody for this problem? Myself or somebody else? And put myself in their shoes. What do I think caused the problem? And what should they have done? For example, I don't have enough money now. The cause is I blame myself, I never finished my degree. What should I have done? I should have finished it. Okay, put yourself in their shoes like what you did yesterday, but in a very practical sense of try to imagine in their mind what would have been the unique pluses and minuses that could have caused them to prefer this. They might have exaggerated this plus or exaggerated that minus to cause them to do this. So this is a basic structure that we've got, which is on the second page as a template. And we use it to allow people to tell us their story in a very structured way. This is the problem I'm currently experiencing. This is why it's important to me and others. Here's the conflict I face, and here's why it's difficult. There's a unique plus and minus of each of these options. And if I blame somebody, I put myself in their shoes, and I try to see why. A little example here, we're doing a test at schools at the moment. Kids being bullied, right? So I'm being bullied at school. It's causing me to be scared of going to school. I don't enjoy school anymore. Why is it bad for others? As my friends are now also getting bullied just by being associated with me. What should I change? I must fight back versus just take it. Each of these have got a unique plus and minus. This kid will be stuck unless it can find a way to gain and retain all the pluses without gaining and retaining the minuses. And that's what we do in step 3. But we also ask them to put themselves in the shoes of the bully. What caused the problem? This guy's bullying them. What do you want him to do? Stop. Okay, now put yourself in their shoes and see if you can understand why. And one of the big insights that we had is a lot of the suffering that we experience as human beings is when we don't understand why things are happening to us. Why we do stuff and why other people do stuff to us. So that's what step 2 is about, is really just to understand that the real problem is not this. The real problem is both sides have a conflict, that they haven't yet resolved in a way that gives a win-win. Then what we do in step 3, we're trying to prevent the mistake of people resolving conflicts by compromising. You get taught that's the way to resolve conflicts. But resolving conflicts with a compromise means we have to give up something. There's an inherent assumption that for me to win, you have to lose, or for both of us to win, we both have to lose. And what we did here was we said, actually there's 4 viable options that you didn't previously consider that can give you more upside and less downside. So the first one is I call change plus plus. It says that change is only viable if it doesn't require me to give up this positive, and that it doesn't require me to gain this negative. So we simply ask them, what can you add to the idea of, say, stopping smoking, so you don't have to give up a stress coping mechanism and that you don't automatically gain weight. And they just added in. It's like a thought experiment. We have another step that's a bit more advanced that helps them to uncover some of the assumptions below that. And often it's self-harming assumptions. I'm not good enough, or I've learned the wrong lesson from experience. Do it to them before they do it to you. Or do it to myself before they do it to you, right? So those are all, but there's an advanced step that we can go through if that doesn't work. But then we say, but not change is also an option. It's only viable if it doesn't require you to give up this positive that you thought you could only get from the change, or have to live with a constant frustration. So we ask them again, get a new iPhone versus keep your old iPhone. Why is the old iPhone, why would that be viable? If you don't have to give up all the positives that you thought could only come from a new one, or that you have to keep on living with a thing that you're quite embarrassed to take out, right? So what can I add? Maybe I can update my software, maybe I can buy a new cover. So it just gets them into the mode of thinking about new options that they previously didn't consider, but in a very systematic way. They might have discovered it completely randomly. The third one is to say when to change and when not, right? And that's an interesting thing. We use it often with people that are in abusive relationships. To say that your ambivalence is coming from the fact that you see both the positive and negative of staying and the positive and negative of going. What are you waiting for? What's the condition that must exist for you that makes the decision easy? So the way to resolve that type of conflict is, as long as the following is true, I'll stay. As soon as this happens, I'll go, right? As long as this is, I'll keep on using my old iPhone or my old IT system. But as soon as this happens, I'll go. So it gets them into the mode of coming up with a decision rule that can resolve the conflict by understanding the condition that's causing the conflict. And then the last one is kind of thinking out of the box that says, now you understand what you really want and what you don't want. Can you think of any other way of achieving that? For example, implement SAP versus use my old legacy system. Now that I understand the unique pluses and minuses, maybe outsourcing the whole thing is another option that I previously didn't consider. So what step 3 is about is getting them into a very systematic way, using their emotions, intuition, but to step through 4 options. And we encourage them to try all 4 and then to select one. And then the last 2 remaining mistakes is we use yes, buts, reservations that we give ourselves or that others give us. They try to help. They say, yes, I like your idea, but there's some buts, right? It's not sufficient to be a win for everybody. It has some potential negatives. There's some implementation obstacles. Why can't I use those to create a more detailed solution? So we call it yes, but planning. We say, pick your desired solution. Think of all the reasons why you shouldn't do this, all the yes, buts, and for each one of them raise a yes and create a fully baked solution. And this is where stakeholders get involved in. They become owners of it when you give them an opportunity to be as negative as possible. Tell us all the reasons why it wouldn't work. And then the only other thing that's remaining is to say, the last mistake we make is we suck at doing good experiments. We don't communicate clearly our analysis, and we don't follow our own solution. We compromise. So like we buy that ab roller, and they said you'll get results if you use it 15 minutes a day. And how much do we use it? 15 minutes a week, right? The problem with that is we'll never know whether the solution could have worked. So what the app does is it automatically summarizes your full analysis in a kind of a project charter. It says, reminder, this is why you need to change. This is the problem that you were trying to solve from step one. What are you trying to achieve? These are the pros you want. These are the cons you don't want. Those will be our flags to measure whether we're making progress or not. And then the how-to is the change plus, all the ands that we've added. And we can use that to communicate clearly with all the stakeholders, but also to keep track of it. And then the last part that the app does, the last part that the app does, it allows us to monitor. It allows us to monitor progress. So not started, in progress, frozen. I caught myself multitasking, still want to do it, but I'm putting it so that my coaches or counselors can see it's still there, but I've frozen it. Completed means I've actually completed all the steps, but I haven't yet achieved the outcome. And then A is for achieve. And the positive of this is we can now, because it's an app, we can now monitor the progress. We can see which step somebody is in or what step I'm in. Or if I've completed the analysis, I can see where the implementation status is. So in summary, this is basically what the process looks like. And the sheets that you've got, we call it Tell Us Your Story on one page. And that captures the first two steps. So what's a problem or opportunity you're facing that's putting pressure on you to make a change? Why is it important to you to resolve it? Why is it important to others? We've used this, for example, in prisons now. An offender comes in, they've just been rearrested. We want to detect whether they're suffering from sort of antisocial cognition. How can you check it? Do they have a clear understanding of why they're there and why it's important for them, and especially the people that they care about? So in here, the question is slightly modified. As who do you care about? My mum. Why is it important for your mum that you never do this again? And then you see the emotions coming out, right? And then it asks them, so is this important enough for you to actually make a change in your life now? Now let's look at what's a change that you can make. You know, stop using drugs, get out of the gang, right? Versus what do you normally do instead? And improve your understanding about why this is a good option, what's the positives of that, and what's the negatives if you don't do it. Those are the reasons for the change. But there's also reasons against the change, that if you ignore, you're just going to keep doing the same thing. Right? And that's what we do with education. We keep on telling people the pros of stop smoking and the cons if they don't, as if ignorance is the problem. It's like the joke where the guy walks up to the woman and says, "Excuse me, ma'am, your smoking is bothering me." And she says, "Bothering you? It's killing me." Right? It's not that they are ignorant, they know, but why are they stuck? There's an assumption or belief here that they'll have to give up something that's really important to them, or they'll have to gain something that they really don't want. And it's just a fast track way of exposing those assumptions or beliefs. And then, of course, if they do blame somebody, whether it's themselves or somebody else, is to get them to repeat the process for the person they blamed. What did they do to you, or what did you do to yourself that caused this problem? What should they have done? Put yourself in their shoes and raise the positives and negatives. So where have we tested this? We've tested in the private sector. Like, for example, the essence of the solution for Microsoft, we had a team of guys using this process to try and understand why there's avoidable shortages and surpluses. What is the beliefs and assumptions that drive it? We applied it in Utah State, where we found out from spend it or lose it. We built a simulation model. They're wasting somewhere between 3 and 8% of the total budget because of spend it or lose it. There's a decision every year to allocate resources. Nobody knows exactly how much, so we have to guess. The problem is, once we've allocated, we can't change it. And then on top of that, we amplify it by allowing or forcing people to spend it or lose it. So even if you have a good year, you'll build up a deficit, because those people that need more will come back and ask for more budget. Those that didn't need more will have to spend it, so you'll always run at a deficit, even if you have more good years than bad years. We've tested it in the public sector, we've tested it with individuals, and I'm really excited about the schools part. is giving kids a simple app that they can use to understand why they and other people do stuff, and of course find practical ways of resolving it with win-wins. And that's kind of where we are now and where we need help. We've created this app. It's available in all the app stores. We've got some exciting endorsements, but we could use a lot more. People, bloggers, influencers coming out and say, I've used the school app. How can the app help you make better decisions? This is how it's helped me. We have a little demo that you can see how to use the app, where it simply asks you questions and you provide the answer, and Harmony, our friendly virtual advisor, raises insights as you go along and helps you to check certain assumptions. This is about stop smoking. Just one slide here. A couple of things that we have built in is we've made the app completely free to use. So when you download the app, you can see a personal example and a business example. We want to add more to that, kids examples. You can monitor your progress. You can see which step you are in or where you are on your implementation status. You can share your analysis and implementation status with friends or colleagues privately, but you can also share it publicly, either anonymously or with your full credentials. And the idea here is that we start learning from each other, not just from ourselves. So you can now go into our app and say, I'm having a problem with my mother-in-law. And it'll pop up who's had problems with mothers-in-laws and what was the assumptions and beliefs they had to challenge to resolve it, right? Or who's having issues in their relationship, or I've got a startup and I'm struggling to grow or raise funding. How did I resolve that? What was the assumption or belief that I challenged? And then for the kids, we've recently added a messenger interface. We realize that the graphical interface is nice for some people, but the kids especially just like to type, right? So Harmony is asking the question, so what's a change that you are considering? And then what would be the unique pros and cons? You simply answer, and then it fills in that diagram in the background. And at the end of every step, you can get a summary, beautiful summary. You can print it out as a PDF. This is my story. We had a recent testimonial. I've started working with Vanilla
I
Ice.
take all the good with the bad, because if you think about, when you got a cloud over your life, you're going to have to take those negative times in your life and everything to even appreciate the good ones. Because if everything was good all the time, you wouldn't even appreciate it. You take it for granted. So you need them little clouds over your life to realize how awesome the sunshine is when it comes out.
Check out the Odyssey program and evaporate those dark clouds with the new app, the Omni app. Make it happen.
So the Odyssey program is a program that we've
I
created.
take all the good with the bad, because if you think
That we've created that's a kind of both available as live versions as well as online versions, and we provide all the knowledge for free for people that want to offer it in their own schools or communities. There's an online version that I recorded that they could use as supplementation if they don't feel confident. The app is for free. So this is the template. I would highly encourage you over the next day, if you have time, to pick any issue that you're currently facing that's putting pressure on you to make a change in your life or your business. And make sure that's really important enough that you will invest a bit of time. There's a kind of a deep inconsistency in decision making. We walk around with dark clouds for weeks and months and sometimes years, but we won't sit the hell down for just an hour or two to reflect on it, to see what the hell is happening here, right? And is there not options that I have to resolve it in a way that's win-win-win? So that's the template that you can fill in. There's lots of examples. If you go to YouTube, you type in my name and Procon Cloud or Harmony Decision Maker, there's a lot of examples that's been recorded. So just one thing here, just to highlight on the diagram, how easy the diagram makes it to help expose bad assumptions. If you're worried that you might overreact and make a change that ends up being bad for you, get a divorce, get a new job, right? Lose your temper. It's probably because of an exaggerated frustration with the status quo or an exaggerated expectation of the future. Right? So the app will just pause you there and say, are you sure you haven't exaggerated these two? Because if you have, there's a good chance that you might overreact and make a bad change or choice. If you want to understand why you might have procrastinated and not made good changes, it's either an exaggerated fear of losing a positive that you associate with your current situation, or an exaggerated fear of effort or risk. related to the new situation. So we've created a storyline. The positive of the change is a pot of gold at the top of the mountain. The change is climbing the mountain. Not change means staying below. There's a pot of the gold at the top, there's an alligator at the bottom. Either of those two could be big enough for you to run up the mountain. But there's also reasons not to do it. First of all, there's all the effort and risk to climb the mountain that's represented by crutches. And there's a beautiful mermaid at the base of the mountain that you'll have to leave behind. For the girls, you can put a beautiful merman there.
Okay.
So what we've seen is that if you take people, I think you were talking about the first person, second person, third person, right? Is to get them to step out in the third person when they use an analogy like this, and people and kids and CEOs, I was so shocked, CEOs are talking, what's your mermaid again? You know, what's your pot of gold, what's your crutches? So it gives them a common language to share their assumptions and beliefs that are normally quite hidden in our subconscious. And the storyline has really made a big difference. So this is kind of the remaining challenges, you know, getting our UI simpler. It's all been funded by ourselves. Like I said, we do sometimes get paid a lot of money from these big guys that we help make a lot more money. We use it in this foundation, but it would be great to get some help there. The virtual advisor, we can put in AI, sentiment analysis, that as the person is typing, it can color the background of your messenger UI, right? So imagine you're using WhatsApp, and as you're typing the message, it's analyzing the words and the frequency of the words to accurately detect your emotion. And if it detects that you are experiencing one of the extremes of the emotions, too high or too low, it can pause you and say, are you okay? Is there somebody I can connect you with? Here are some exercises to slow down your thinking a little bit. Right. So there's a tremendous amount of use with the AI. Of course, you can imagine if you have this with large enough groups, the amount of data that it could be generating, right? What are the issues people are really facing? What's the assumptions or beliefs they have that are causing them to be against or for birth control or gun control or abortions, right? Is to expose those and see if there aren't ways to come up with better pros and cons. So that's where I want to leave it. As I'll just take a few minutes for questions, I'll play one of the videos that kids created that used our app for bullying. So we can export directly out of our app into a little thing like Video Scribe that will allow them to create a video of their story. Those are not close, I'll read it. Meet Keaton and the problem that is hanging over him like a dark cloud. So what's my problem? I'm being bullied at school. Why is this bad for you? I now hate going to school, but I'm too scared to tell my parents or teacher. Why is it bad for others? Is my friends feels bad for me, and I'll also be just by being my friends. And then taking you through the process to say, so why is this such a difficult decision? Why haven't you acted yet? What changes can you make? So I must stand up for myself, or at least tell my parents or teachers, versus what do I normally do instead? I stay too afraid to tell anybody to fight back, so I just have to take it. What's the unique positive of doing this? Could it be that they're ignorant of this? No. I have a chance to make the bully stop, or at least prove that I'm not a coward. What are the unique pros of not doing it? I can live up to my parents' values of love and non-violence. Don't fight back. What's the unique negatives? If I try to stop it, if I tell my parents or teacher the bully might come back and beat me up. If I fight, I might get into trouble. And what's the unique negative? If I don't change, I start believing the things that the bully is saying about me. That I'm a coward and that nobody likes me. And then we encourage them to also fill in the side for the bully. Try and understand why the bully hasn't made a change. what's the cause of your problem? This kid is bullying me. Now they might have put in here themselves that they don't stand up, that they don't have courage to stand up, if they blame themselves. And then it would be, what should you have done? I should stand up, right? So you can see the two are mirrored, in that when you blame yourself, you're dealing with a vicious cycle essentially. And it just helps the kids to try and imagine this bully. And what we do in the app, it will say if you really can't come up with any reasons, it will ask you, for example, have you ever bullied anybody else yourself? Your younger brother or sister, right? Why did you do that? What's the unique positive that you got from bullying them, or the unique negative that you were scared to gain if you just simply stopped? So again, that third person act helps to fill in boxes. If the box stays empty, it means that there's a confirmation bias. They don't get it. They're ignorant about that. They struggle to put it in. So I'll stop it there just briefly and continue to the, that's really the end of the shorts.
How it puts it all together at the end? Is it
Sorry?
okay? Can you just show us how it puts it all together at the end?
Yeah,
the
there's,
end of it, please.
So this is basically what the end diagram looks like. And what the app then does is to say, look, you've got two options here. The first one is you need to find a way of resolving this conflict, regardless of what the bully does, right? So it will take you through those 4 steps, and it'll get the kids to look at every one of those options. Change plus plus, not change plus plus, when not to, and another change. And then it will also encourage them to put themselves in the shoes of the ones that they're blaming. One of my proudest moments I shared yesterday was we did this at my 2 boys' school, and their version of what to change was not whether to fight back or to tell a teacher. Their version was, how can I to help the bully stop bullying versus to not help him, which I thought was quite selfish, right? And it's very interesting. We've had reports of kids going to the bully and saying, you know, this is not a win-win at the moment. It's kind of a lose-lose. You're going to get caught out. You're going to get expelled. You know, I'll get beaten up. My lunch money gets stolen. Let's sit down and see if we can figure this out, right? And it's actually resolved things. And we had a report recently where this kid was saying the bully is now their best friend, right? They suddenly, the win for the bully was actually having friends and not having everybody being afraid of them. But their problem was, and it was verbalized in their language, essentially as the bully learned from being abused at home, do it to them before they do it to you. Right? That was their version of why they kept on bullying. So we're really, really excited about this. But like I said, we funded it all ourselves. We've got these 4 apps now that all is focused on helping people make better, faster decisions when it really matters. This one I'm the most passionate about, because it can expose so quickly all these limiting assumptions or beliefs with your kid or CEO of a company. So thank you very much.
I think it's awesome, and thank you so much. That's just amazing what you've been doing. You talk about kids. I've got kids, as you know. I've got an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, and there's absolutely zero chance that they'll be able to focus on that.
It's very interesting. That's our assumption, right? If you gamify something, so we've already tested this, right? I go to kids' parties and the mums go, "What you can have them, right? Do something." And I say, "Guys, I need your help to test an app, right? This is what the app is there to do," and we check them going through the process. If they use that messenger interface, it's so easy for them to go through it. We keep on having to simplify and improve it, but the assumption that we had, even kids that can't read or write yet, they draw diagrams. They draw sad faces, happy faces.
And that's it, they're able
Yeah.
to do that.
And that's where a lot more work has to be done. But what we've seen already, I just did a program for kids with mental health issues in the UK. And the youngest person there was 9 years old. And her conflict was whether to kill myself or not.
Jesus.
9 years old, right? 9 years old. And the big insight she had was, what's the unique benefit from killing yourself? And it's asked in a very kind of straightforward way, right? Not, there's something wrong with you, just, by the way, what's the unique benefit of killing yourself? And she said, it will stop the pain. So, okay, what pain, right? And is there any other way of doing it? And that's essentially just what we've discovered is, thinking fast and slow with Daniel Kahneman, we sometimes make mistakes when we use our slow mode of thinking when we should have used our fast mode, right? When we should have trusted our intuition. This is focusing on the other problem, is when we could have really benefited from slowing down our thinking a little bit. And that's the testing that we've been doing, is to see, is it effective to just get somebody to slow down their thinking, right? So for the kids, it shouldn't be step 1, step 2, it should be level 1 and level 2. We have a pretty good idea, but it's really just partnering with the right people, getting the funding, improving the UI and testing it, and hopefully getting it out into schools, etc. Any more questions? Thank you. Yes, Daniel.
You talk about intuition and gut feeling, and we're in business, so a lot of times we have to make decisions very quickly.
Yeah.
And, for myself, without trusting my gut, I don't know if we would be where we're at. But I mean, this is fantastic too, to have as a tool. Is there instances where do you think that we should use this, or someone should use this in every decision they make?
No, it's two things. It's only when a decision is consequential, right? That's the first one. And the second one is that you don't have to make it right now.
Right.
So if you can give yourself an hour to just stand back, I think Richard wrote an article a couple of years back on decision making, and it's essentially talking about the major steps that you could follow, right? Make sure you don't do it in isolation. Check it with other people, because we all have blind spots. So we go in, we use this method, an hour later they come out with a key decision. Right? Everybody contributed because we might have missed something here. They go to the step 3, the 4 options, and they try all 4, and they pick the one that's the best. And there's all of this stuff is intuition and emotions, right? It's just to say, be careful. Sometimes we exaggerate those things, or we underestimate them. We all have blind spots. So, unless you have to run away from the line right now, then trust your gut, right? But if you have an hour or 2 or a day, sometimes a week, just go through the process. Slow down your thinking, you'll get benefits every single time. And even if it's just to help other people understand your thinking, because often that's the problem, they don't get it. When you've put in what you have as assumptions in here, they can see what your thinking is all about. Right?
Got lots of questions.
Sure.
I'll ask you.
And I know we have to get going, so.
Couple of things.
Yeah.
So obviously when someone's under extreme stress, their ability to think clearly can be limited.
Yes.
So you mentioned in text being able to determine emotional state.
Yeah.
So if someone's in fight or flight,
Yeah.
how do you get them out of that to the point where they can actually go through a rational process
Right.
of choosing options?
So part of just being asked questions, very simple questions that they can just answer. When they start answering, they start telling their story. And there's a whole amount of research that's been done on all the benefits of telling your story. It's part of us slowing down our thinking. And when I tell my story to you, I'm communicating to you my assumptions and beliefs. And as I'm sharing it, I can start checking and challenging it. As long as it stays there, I'm not checking and challenging it. So there's a couple of tricks that we can use. Just identifying when you're in that state where you absolutely feel like you have to make a decision right now, to say, okay, let's go for it step by step, right? What's putting pressure on you to make the change? What's that situation? And why is it important for you to resolve this and others? And then, okay, what's the option that you have? What are you thinking about doing about it? Versus what's the status quo? What do you normally do? So just slowing down definitely helps, but underneath that we can do the detection and say, if we detect that they're in a heightened state, that they might benefit. Not just from a counselor, but we could make via the app, say there's a couple of other users that have the same issue. The kids have often told us that they prefer to talk to other users, right? Because they get the teacher and the counselor hasn't been 12 years old or 16 years old for 20, 30, 40 years, right? So just connecting them with somebody that shares that issue and can help them reflect a little bit more objectively really helps a lot. But it's a remaining challenge as we're doing research, we're figuring out what works, what doesn't. But we want to use it to build it into the app, to build this knowledge base so we can start sharing and learning from each other. Yeah, Thomas,
Just
sorry.
going sort of talking to
Yeah.
Linda's question around that fight or flight, whatever it is. People, when they're in fight and flight mode, tend not to be looking at apps and making decisions really fast. Is there an alert system built in?
No, there's no automatic alert system, but what we've seen is when we start reminding ourselves, right? So we had a recent case where the CEO of a company contacted me. He had sent his kids on this. And he said these kids that's aged 11 and 15 walked in when him and his wife was arguing and said, "Dad, you remember you sent us on a training course about how to make better decisions? Maybe time to sit down," right? So there's a whole bunch of stuff that I think, you know, with the right research, we can figure out what is it that, because you just want to intervene, right? And get them to just take a pause, slow down their thinking. There's things like Headspace, etc., that does it with music, but that doesn't help you to uncover the causation behind it. And that to me is an important part. So maybe there's a way of combining them, but we really are excited about what the results that we see. Everybody told us you won't get kids to use it, you won't get adults to use it. We tested it in India where people don't share problems with their wives, never mind with somebody else. And we got them to share deeply personal problems in a work environment in front of others. Initially they said never, and then one person did, and then suddenly they realized we're all special but we're not unique, and then it opens up the floodgates. You just need that one person. So when you're facilitating the session, I always have that person in my back pocket, right, to come and share. And if I know there's other people with the same, we'll get them to come and share a deeply personal issue, right? And that normally is enough to open up the floodgates. Yeah. Yes, Thomas?
Yeah. So I think I just want to share also that when there's a huge complexity, then it's almost impossible for people to make a decision. So in these examples, maybe they can make a better decision, and that's amazing. It can have an incredible outcome to make a better decision on something important in life. But like what we are facing is that it's almost impossible even for very intelligent people to make a decision because there's too much complexity, too many parameters. So we have brilliant doctors in our clinics, but they have about 20,000 pieces of a bigger jigsaw puzzle that they have to put together because we're measuring so many factors of what's going on in the human organism. And even the most brilliant doctors, if they don't have years of experience to put these pieces together, there's no way they can do it. They can evaluate each and every piece, they can look at the pieces, but they cannot put them together. And that is why something like this is absolutely crucial, because otherwise it is only those few people who might have the experience to put the pieces together who can do it, which means there's no scalability, that it's a bottleneck. So then to bring in something like this with artificial intelligence-based expert model actually makes things scalable, and it helps the doctors put the pieces together. I think this is just such
and just to clarify, so of those three causes, ignorance, right? Ignorance is lack of knowledge, or the fact that something is counterintuitive, or that I haven't yet developed the intuition, right? There we have different apps. There we use this artificial intelligence engine that Thomas have used, and we use simulation models as a way of training and getting people to experience counterintuitives where small changes can have big impact. What I've shared with you now is specifically focused on when it's not ignorance, but inertia or ineptitude, right? That's where you can educate somebody, and when their behavior doesn't change, you know it's inertia and ineptitude, right? We put big labels on cigarette packets, people don't stop smoking, it's clearly not ignorance. We need a different way. We need to find out what's the assumptions or beliefs behind them, keep on doing it. And it might be very good, it might be better than an alternative, right? I always say, if smoking helps you not to kill yourself, you should keep on smoking, right? Many people that live into their hundreds that kept on smoking. But when it becomes so bad that it's wasting your attention every single day by feeling guilty about it, by being blamed for it, then you might get a benefit of just sitting down and figuring out why. Why haven't you done it yet? So it's about figuring out what's the cause of the decision mistake, and then deploying the right technology and app to help solve that. Yes.
So as you kind of implemented this around for individuals all the way to large corporations, what's the range of time you've seen in how long it takes?
We started off with a 5-day program.
Yeah.
We got it down to 4 days, 3 days, and then with the app we now have it down to 1 day, and in extreme cases, all the right people in the room, a couple of hours. Yeah. And we've tested it with a wide range. What I like about the kids is they don't get overwhelmed with as long as they just follow the questions. They just try to answer the questions, where some of the adults try to, what's behind this? Why am I being asked this? Just answer the questions. You know, there's enough safety. But yeah, so it's a more general case is a couple of hours to a day, and people can at least get to step 3, and then step 4 they can use to get other people's inputs. Give me all the yes buts, right? But for every yes but you give me, you have to give me a yes and we'll add that, and that makes them feel part ownership of the solution. So Ray, you had a question for that?
No.
You just want to go?
I was stressed.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
You said there's other apps that focus on intuition, because I completely agree. It's something that you need the experience to develop, right? You can't rely on your
we
gut.
have an app that can learn how a top human expert makes intuitive decisions, something that took Thomas maybe 20 years to develop. We can extract that in a couple of hours and make it available with infinite scale.
Does that app, I guess, because sometimes people don't rely on their gut because they feel, for that reason, they don't have the confidence in a specific subject matter. What, can that app then gauge your
That's a great point. So
experience? Like you're ready to
without
use your
focusing
gut.
too much on Thomas, we did a project with correctional services. So I met with the head of corrections and I asked him one question. I said, who are you terrified of losing? And he said, I'm terrified of losing a few of my adult probation parole agents. These guys over 30, 40 years have developed incredible intuition to do risk assessment on offenders, to detect antisocial cognition behaviors, etc. So what we did was we learned how they did it, right? We made it available in an app, and there's 2 big benefits that the person now gets that now use that. Previously they had to fill in a questionnaire of 54 questions. When we checked with the top expert, they only looked at 8 things, and 2 of them weren't even on the list. So imagine all the time being wasted asking people to fill in these long questionnaires when it wasn't being used. The second one was, he also came up with, experts comes up with classification, right? So they don't look at continuous variables like age. They go 0 to 2 is the same, 3 to 5. But what we've seen is it's not just a knowledge gap, it's often a confidence gap. So how they use the app is they get shown what they must consider. It asks them to make a decision, and as soon as they make a decision, it activates a button that says, ask Thomas, and they know Thomas is the top agent, right? It's as if they were able to phone Thomas quickly, and Thomas has just already asked him the questions that he needs to know or she needs to know, and then they can see what Thomas would have done. And if it was just a confidence issue, suddenly they will act immediately. They go, but also getting that feedback that we spoke about, knowing what the top expert would have done in every case that you're facing helps them to build intuition much, much faster. And now we really have to go. Thank you so much for the time.